Alright, so for 6-6, we're on one-step equations. We just finished our distributive property. We're then going to have a quiz, and then an input and output tables is the next lesson. But first you have a quiz. Okay, so you'll be able to solve a one-step equation that involves multiplication and division, and explain how to solve a one-step equation that involves multiplication and division. So our vocabulary is multiplication property of equality and division property of equality. So we're going to find m first. So in our on m, I have that as page 11. Okay, and it's halfway down that page. So multiplication property of equality. Oops, sorry. If you multiply the side of an equation, if you multiply one side of an equation by a value, you must multiply the other side. So down here is an example. I have x divided by 6 equals 4. So we're gonna find out soon. We're gonna multiply both sides by 6. So this is the part that's the multiplication property of equality. We did it to both sides. Because I have it here and here, it stays equal. Okay? So for example, if your mom doubles, that means to times by 2, your allowance, she has to double your sister's allowance. Because if she doubles yours and your sister finds out, she's gonna have a fit. So you kind of have to keep things equal. Okay, then we have division property of equality, so that's under D, which is on page 4. So we're on D, and we're down at the very bottom left. Okay, division property of equality. If you divide one side of an equation by a value, you must divide the other. Okay, so for my example, you have 6x equals 24. So if I divide by 6 here, this means division, that fraction line. Here, I'm dividing by 6. If I do that on one side, I have to do it on the other, and I get 4. Okay, so my personal connection, if your mom cuts your chores in half, meaning she gets rid of half of your chores, she also has to cut your brother's chores in half, because otherwise your brother's going to think that's so unfair. So to keep things equal, equality. All right. So we have our building background. So we're going to describe how we would undo the following things. So if I walk forward 5 steps, how would I undo that? What would be the opposite of that? How would I undo it? I would walk backward 5 steps. Okay, putting on your shoe. What's the opposite of putting on your shoe? How would you get back to where you started? You started with no shoe on. You put your shoe on, so how can you get that? You'd have to take your shoe off. Okay, adding -4. What would be the opposite of adding a -4? The opposite of adding a -4 would be adding a +4. Because that's like going back 4, so we want to go forward 4. Right, the opposite of multiplying by 5. So opposite of multiplying would be dividing by, and now these ones don't become the opposite. It would just be dividing by 5. If we made it the opposite, that's what's going to switch that sign around, and we wouldn't want that. Okay, so dividing by -7, the opposite of dividing is multiplying by whatever we divided by. So multiplying by -7. Okay, so here we go. We're going to solve this equation, 6y equals 42. I'm going to just rewrite it over here. Okay, so we need to isolate x. Did I write that on everyone? This is supposed to say y on this one. Y by undoing the times 6. So multiplying by 6. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to divide both sides by 6. Okay, so I'm going to draw my line down the middle. I'm going to just divide. So when we divide, we use a fraction line. And the reason why is because later on when we do multi-step equations, we're going to have a lot of things that we have to divide by. Okay, so if I divide by 6 on one side, I have to divide by 6 on the other. When I do this, the 6 divided by 6 really just turns into a 1. So I get 1y equals 42 divided by 6. I use my thing here. Okay, so I'm going to go to 6. I go down to 42. And I see 7. So it's going to be 7. Okay, and 1 times y, anything times 1 stays the same. So this is going to end up being y equals 7. Okay, just to double check, if I plugged it in here, does 6 times 7 equal 42? And the big thing we want to double check is positive times a positive equal a positive. Yep, and 6 times 7 is 42. I just showed you that on the multiplication chart. So that works. Check. 42 is the same as 42. Okay, next one, number 2. Solve the equation. So I'm going to rewrite it here. Negative 9t equals 81. We need to isolate t by undoing the multiplying by negative 9. Okay, so to undo multiplying by negative 9, we're going to divide by negative 9. We're going to divide both sides. Okay, so I draw my line down the equal sign. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 9. Divide by negative 9. Divide by negative 9. Okay, remember that means to divide. So when I do negative 9 divided by negative 9, I really think 9 divided by 9. 9 divided by 9, if I have a number divided by itself, it's always equal to 1. So 1t. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Now, 81 divided by 9, so I grab 9, I go down to 81, scroll over, and I get 9. And I just want to double check. A positive divided by a negative is a positive. Nope. Positive divided by a negative is a negative, so negative 9. And then 1 times t is really just t, so t equals negative 9. Okay, so then just double check. If I do negative 9 times negative 9, do I get 81? And this check is really good for just double checking those positives and negatives. So does negative times a negative equal a positive? Yep, and then 9 times 9 is 81. So that would be positive 81, so it does work. Okay, backside, 2 more problems. Alright, so we're solving this equation. C divided by 18 equals negative 7. So we need to isolate x by undoing the division of 18. And it's actually c, not x. So to undo dividing, we're going to multiply both sides by 18. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it over here. So I have c divided by 18 equals negative 7. Draw my line down the middle, and then I'm going to multiply by 18. I'm going to just use my dot there, so multiply by 18. So what that really does here is when I multiply by 18 and divide by 18, that makes a 1. So 1c equals, okay, negative 7 times 18. So I'm going to go 7, and then down to 18, which you aren't going to be able to see where I am here, and I'm right here. And I get 126. Okay, but a negative times a positive is a negative. So C equals negative 126. Okay, and just to double check, does negative 126 divided by 18 equals negative 7? Well, I know that 126 divided by 18 is 7. And then a negative divided by a positive is a negative, so it does work. Okay, last one. Solve the equation. P divided by negative 14 equals negative 5. So we need to isolate the p, get the p by itself, by undoing the division of negative 14. So to undo dividing, we are going to multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by negative 14. Okay, so I have p divided by negative 14 equals negative 5. Okay, so to undo dividing by negative 14, I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 14. So when I divide and multiply by the same thing, I just end up with 1. So 1p equals negative 5 times negative 14. So I'm going to find 5, 14, and that is 70. And a negative times a negative is a positive. So my last thing is 1 times p can just be p, so p equals 70. So we just want to double check. So 70 divided by negative 14 equals negative 5. I did know that this equaled 5, 70 divided by 14, but then a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So negative 5 equals negative 5. Okay, last one. We use the properties of equality. That means we do things to both sides. Equality. To solve equations. To undo multiplication, we divide both sides of the equation. To undo division, we multiply both sides of the equation. And then check your answer by plugging in the value in for the variable. And that is it.